Hello, hi, welcome to Top Employers Inspire. 3 days of expertly curated content for you to gain valuable insights from the world of work. Sorry for a short little delay, technicalities, traveling the world, connecting Amsterdam, the Netherlands to the United States. We can't always depend on technical stuff. Top Employers Institute, we want to inspire with purpose, and we are genuinely motivated to make a positive impact on the world of work. And to do so, we also broadly share insights, just like this event. We've got 3 days packed with sessions for you to get the biggest learning out of these sessions. Just to name a few, during Top Employers Inspire, you can learn from certified employers like UST on driving DE&I with social impact. We have Nestlé China on mentor networks, and we've got Coca-Cola explaining how they deliver their personalized digital employee experience. I would suggest to register multiple sessions, register for multiple sessions. First of all, because you'll learn the most and you'll get the highest return on the results and learning. And second of all, you'll be the first in line to get the access to the recording as well. So we're aware that you may not be able to attend all of those sessions, but then you'll definitely get the first pop email with the recording. And now we're connecting live to the United States, where our regional director, Trevor Bogan, meets with NTT Data's VP of People and Organization, Kim Curley, to discuss fostering a strong culture in global organization. So I'm handing it over to Trevor. Hi, welcome, Trevor.
Hey, how are you, Walter? Thank you so much. We appreciate being here.
Sorry, I don't hear Trevor currently, so we may have to open. Just 1 second, Trevor. We'll tweak the audio, and in the
Okay.
meantime, I'm just going to tell the audience. So Trevor is going to do the introduction of the speaker. We'll have an extensive presentation, and after the presentation, Trevor will also deal with the Q&A. Obviously, there's room for you to answer those questions. In the meantime, I'm just, we still, if it happens, it happens. We got technicalities. The whole day went fluent, and now suddenly there's something
Can you
wrong
hear
on
me
our
now?
side. I'm asked to continue speak just a little bit. All right. Do
You have audio now?
we have a
Walter,
clear?
can you hear me?
Okay, we don't hear you, but apparently the audience at home hears you. So I'm going to hand over to
Perfect.
Trevor, and from here, please enjoy the presentation.
All right. Thank you so much, Walter. We really appreciate it. And thank you for joining us for this session of the Inspire series. This is going to be a great session. I'm really excited to introduce this topic and have this conversation. And we are going to go to this topic for fostering strong culture in a global organization. And who better to have this conversation with than a fantastic HR thought leader? This is Kim Curley, who is VP of People and Organization with NTT Data. Kim, thank you so much for joining myself, Top Employers, to talk around this topic that I think everyone in the HR space, global region, are all talking about this topic. And so what I'd first like to do, Kim, is just introduce yourself, kind of talk about your role within NTT Data and kind of what that looks like so everyone can get an idea of what you do for your organization there.
Sure. Trevor, thank you. And to Top Employers, thank you for having us on today. Me and Trevor, the dynamic duo for this time in the overall program. Really excited to be here and looking forward to the conversation with Trevor and to hear everybody's questions as well. So a little bit about me. First, I am based in the United States, as you heard earlier, and I am in Charlotte, North Carolina. So if any of you are nearby, make sure you have a big shout out and connect with me. We'll go grab coffee, or nothing better than making new friends. So that's the first thing I'd say. Second is I really have two roles within NTT Data. The first is that I lead our people and organization consulting practice. And our consulting practice is really focused on the human side of business. So if you think about all of the wonderful, messy human things that happen in a business, that's where me and my team of consultants come in. We do things like organizational change management, org design, org effectiveness. We help with talent strategies. We help with learning and new skilling. So our contributions to our clients are quite broad, but very firmly centered on the human side of the business. Because we do that for our clients, my biggest client and maybe my most important client is my own company, NTT Data. So we do organizational change management and learning and new skilling and all kinds of interesting executive coaching even and leadership development, all kinds of things for our own company as well. So that's the background that I'm coming from and looking very much forward to the conversation.
Yeah, and that's great. And so one of the things, Kim, you said was you're really working, NTT Data is your own client, right? So that's the biggest part of what you do in the HR space. So tell us a little bit about the culture there with NTT Data, kind of like how you started, what was the culture there, and then kind of what it's merged into now and the motivation of the culture within your global organization. If you could tell us a little bit about that.
Perfect. So as you all know, any organization, particularly organizations of any size, have many cultures inside of them. There's not one singular culture, but we can talk a bit about how you create the common thread that ties all of the cultures or all of the climates together. So in the division in which I work for NTT Data, by the way, NTT Data Global is a very large company, approaching 300,000 people based in Japan. So we've got lots and lots of 50 or 80 countries represented, really a large, complex organization. The part of the organization or the operating company that I focus on is a little bit smaller. We're about 50,000 people and we're in a number of countries, but primarily based or headquartered, if you will, in the United States. So when our division inside that company started thinking about the culture, part of what we wanted to embrace is new ways or really new mindsets. We really wanted to embrace new mindsets for the new work that we're all doing. We've all been through a tremendous amount of change through the last three plus years through the pandemic. Lots of things have changed around how we are together or not together in our physical working environments. And the consulting business that we're in is one of those businesses that really is like an apprentice business. It really builds very effectively on people working with each other, seeing how others do it. We talk about learning at the elbow of the elder, if you will, in the consulting business. So we started thinking about, for our division, what was most important and what were those things that maybe had weakened over the pandemic that we needed to re-strengthen. And we came up with really 3 pillars of our culture: trust, community, and success. And for us, that's really where we started to build our own culture inside the culture of the larger NTT Data. The great part about that is we built our culture on all of the foundations of the corporate culture, corporate values, corporate missions as well. But it was really about, for our consulting business, how do we define it? What are those things that really make us special or different or make us a place that people want to come work and a place that clients want us to do work for them?
That's fantastic. And there's a lot to unpack there, right? I think you said a lot of great things where you came down and strategized to 3 main points, right? So 3 main topics that you really wanted to focus on. And I think sometimes as global organizations, we get 20 things we really want to work on, and kind of instead of narrowing it down to being more strategic and concise with how you want to do that. So is there one thing that you would say, Kim, in your experience and just kind of working with, the culture and all of that, emblematic of the culture as a whole? Like, what would you say that would be?
Yeah, well, you'll find that I can never give you one when instead I'm going to give you 3. So
Okay.
I would say
Perfect.
there's probably 3 things that we did that are most emblematic of the culture or most important for how we crafted our culture. And the first is we made sure that our employees were engaged in building the things that we built around those cultural pillars of trust, community, and success. This was not a think tank group that went off in a back room and built something and brought it back on a platter and handed it to our employees. That was not the case at all. We engaged our employees and we had them build with us, with each other, and together, so that we were building really from the ground up. I think that's one of the most important things about culture, is if you don't have it from the ground up, it's going to be almost impossible to reinforce it from the top down. The second thing that we did was we really created a social contract with one another, holding each other accountable. So this isn't about, the authority that people have from their space in an organizational hierarchy, but instead how they hold each other accountable to exhibit and to exemplify and to embody those aspects of our culture, which, by the way, we call the way of life. It is our group's way of life. And the third thing that the third thing I know we did that was one of the most impactful things is to really anchor to a career coach model. It's very important to us that we have not only those formal, hierarchical, more mentor-like relationships in the organization, but that we also have places that we can go that help us develop in our role across the different roles that we would play during the course of a year for a consultant, and really over the arc of our careers. So we made it a point to create some holistic coaching training, send our career coaches through that so that we can all help each other develop from wherever we are. But we're really focused on the human elements of that career coach model. So it's less about, let me plot out your next steps on the career ladder. It's much more about, Trevor, let me understand where you want to be and what you want to grow in and what skills you want to develop. And that's really where we focused the career coach model as well.
Yeah, and I think that's great to make that personalized approach, right? Because everyone's different. And I think that having that career coach model really helps. So I thought that is really great. And also what you said is we're ground up. And I think that's where sometimes a lot of organizations miss that step. They kind of go top down instead of kind of going ground up. So I love that mythology around that. So tell me, obviously people in HR, this sounds really good. What were the challenges that you had as a leader, or, overcoming some of these things? And as far as culture, what was like just some of the challenges that you had to overcome?
Sure. Well, I think the most challenging thing, which is always the most challenging thing, is changing people's mindsets and perspectives is far, far more difficult than learning a new skill, than learning any new skill, really. So helping people embrace a growth mindset, which goes along with that mutual accountability that we have in our trust and in our community, focusing more on new ways of doing work and opening people's minds to how they might work differently than they have in the past. When you've got a lot of people who have been with the same organization for a long time, shifting that mindset, and even shifting the approach, if you've got the right mindset, can be really hard. So helping people understand, what does a growth mindset look like versus a closed mindset? That's really tough. I mean, if we think about organizational change, and I'm a sort of a change junkie, if you asked everybody around the world who wants change in their environment, tons of people would raise their hand. But if you asked who wants to change, who wants to actually do the change themselves, pretty much everybody drops their hand right down. So everybody might say, hey, we need to build a new culture. We need to build a new way of working together. We need to build a new way of being successful together. But then when you ask people to let go of old beliefs that no longer serve that goal, or to let go of old patterns or behaviors or habits that no longer serve that goal, that's a lot harder. It takes a tremendous amount of energy, not only from the people who are trying to encourage the change, but also from the brave souls who are trying to make the change. That's always the hardest part, is to be the supporter and to be brave enough to have faith and to step into that new space.
Yeah. So how do you teach that, right? Because I think that's sometimes an internal feeling sometimes. So do you have a structure around, developing that, rewarding people who are or do you apply change agents within the organization? So people kind of that take on that role and raise their hand and say, I'd love to be a part of this group that can help that. How do you kind of manage that, or kind of get people bought into it?
Sure. Great question. We are really lucky in that, and maybe this is the nature of a consulting business, but we're really lucky in that we have a lot of people who are eager to lean into change and lean into new business models. So we were very fortunate to have a number of leaders who really sort of leaders at all level, right? Like I'm not restricting leaders to a particular hierarchical level here. There are people who lead from the broom closet and there are people who lead from the corner office. So we had leaders at all level who were interested in leading the change and really leaning into that. And what we see in those leaders is we see a terrific amount of authenticity and transparency. And when people lead with that authenticity and transparency, what you see is people demonstrating and living and embodying the new behaviors and giving people something to model their behaviors after. So the first thing you get when you've got that those leaders who are willing to lean in is you've got role models, right? So Trevor, you can, or Kim can look at Trevor and say, Trevor's really good at that. It looks like that's working for Trevor. Maybe I can try that. So it gives people a sense of comfort that they can try that. It also gives people that visibility of what's being successful. So if the rest of the organization is saying to Trevor, hey, you're doing it great. You're killing it. This is fantastic. I love the way you're leaning in and trying. Then that helps give, again, permission and courage to the rest of the organization. But lastly, I think when you're trying to change culture, one of the things that will trip you up the fastest is if the organizational elements of your business do not support the cultural change. And what I mean by that is culture is often defined as the worst behavior a company or a group will accept. Like that's what defines culture. We will not go below this level. So if you take a look at your organizational infrastructure and structures and policies, procedures, the way systems are configured for your use, access to tools, those are things that also very much describe your culture. It's not just what Trevor says or does or is rewarded by. It's also what we, the collective organization, give to Trevor. How do we craft that context within which Trevor can be successful or not? That's one of the most difficult, I think, truly difficult parts of culture is to take all of those parts and pieces and run them through a test to say, do they support what we're trying to get out of our culture? Do they support who we know we are? Do they support who we know we want to be in the marketplace? And I think that's, another one of those things that people probably don't give enough time and attention to, and generally stop before it's over. It takes a lot of intestinal fortitude to keep going through all of the organization.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're doing a fantastic job. You and your HR team, Kim, are doing a fantastic job of creating that culture. NTT Data seems like they found a good formula and plan for that. So when you have these leaders, right, you were talking about these leaders that are really inspired, embody the culture, what they want to present down to their employees, their teams, whatever. So you've got those employees that feel like they're part of something bigger. Mm-hmm. And, they build a connection. They seem to stay longer. You see, less, you don't have to retain so many employees. People love it. They want to stay. They're recommending NTT Data to their network, for any open positions, things like that. So what are the benefits that you've seen on your end or immediate returns from kind of doing this culture shift and putting a lot of these really disciplines in place? What have you seen from that?
Sure. Well, a couple of them you hit right off the top. Retention is huge. We are no longer in the Great Resignation like we were about a year ago, if you had asked me that question then. But nobody wants to lose their top performers. And there's a tremendous amount of competition. There is always a tremendous amount of competition for the best performers in every discipline, in every type of company, and frankly, in every geography. The best are the best for a reason, and it's because it's a scarce commodity, right? So that competition is always there. So the more that you can engage your top performers with purpose, with ways that they really identify as meaning or identify with meaning to their work, you will have an outsized, or hopefully a better than your competitors rate of retention of those top performers. So I think that's really important. Second is another one, you hit it right on the top of the head, which is those top performers refer their best friends, who tend to also be top performers, into your company. So it can help you attract the best and the brightest as well. So that's really, really important. I think there's some other things that happen internally that are really quite spectacular as well. One is that you see a magnificent infection rate of that best performer attitude, that best performer capability, that best performer performance, because they are there and positive and engaging, and there's reasons they are the best performers, right? People like that are generally infectious in the organization, and they spread that goodness that they are connected to. So that intangible that becomes employee engagement, which we know drives business performance, is really helped by making sure that you have people connected to that as well. So that's a really, really good thing. The other, I think, which is super important to me, I every day get up knowing that most important job I do is to help others be the best that they can be. So if we're really doing this work to connect to culture, it means I'm helping someone learn something new, or try something new, or realize a goal, or realize a dream, or build something that they didn't know was possible. And that, maybe is the one we talk about least often, but that's the one that changes the world as far as I'm concerned. So for me, that connection to culture, that connection to purpose, that connection to each other and to community drives this magic that happens inside every individual. And that's the part that gets me up and excited every single morning.
No, that's great. No, that's really fantastic to hear. And so, so if you're looking at long term, right? Long term, who's responsible for, keeping and continuing the support of a company culture on a global perspective? Obviously, HR is always growing and evolving, but who do you think long term is responsible for kind of continuing the culture efforts of an organization on a global scale?
Every single one of us. Culture cannot be dictated from the top down, and it cannot be long-term achieved or sustained from the bottom up. It takes both paying attention and pressure in the best possible ways coming from both sides to get it long-term. If the individuals in the workforce start accepting behavior from each other that is counter to the culture will change. Absolutely will change. If higher ups in the organization hire people who bring approaches to work, or attitudes to work, or ways that they treat each other that's counter to the culture will change. There's literally no doubt in anyone's mind the culture of the organization will change. It might not change those fancy words you put on the wall, but it's going to change the reality of the culture in the organization. Likewise, if you start changing, we talked about policies and context and infrastructure. If we start changing those kinds of things within an organization, that can change the culture as well. So we need to have everybody committed to the health and care of the culture. Culture's a lot like a garden. You've got to give it the things that it needs to keep growing, and your garden is going to change. Today's culture is not going to be the exact same as it's going to be 3 years from now. And isn't that wonderful? We're going to learn things in the socio-economic environment. They're going to change our attitudes and our approaches towards things that we didn't know about before. Maya Angelou, a famous poet here in the United States, said, "When we know better, we do better." So if you think about culture changing, that nurturing and that expansion of culture, that dynamic nature of culture is really very garden-like. But it takes everybody. It takes everybody to be committed to the standards and committed to each other.
Yeah, no, that's great stuff. And so obviously we're talking on a global perspective. We have a lot of HR teams here. And what we talked about, Kim, earlier, some HR teams have these actual mini cultures, subcultures, or climates, as some people will call them within organizations. And so How do you create a corporate culture in that context when you're on a global scale and you've got some of these subcultures, these other groups out there, and kind of getting all those people together and kind of breaking down some silos and walls and things like that? How do you think what you're doing at NTT Data or what you see kind of can help someone in that challenge right now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the most maybe I say the most important a lot, don't I, Trevor? But maybe
That's
the most
okay. It
important,
is.
I do,
It
come
is, right?
on,
Yeah.
thank you. Maybe the most important thing we can do when we're trying to create a corporate culture from what is effectively many different cultures is find those foundational stones on which we can all build. So for NTT Data at our corporate, the corporate level, our values are clients first, teamwork, and foresight. So if we think about those values, when we came to do the culture, kind of the key aspects of culture for our division, we built on those. We didn't throw them out and start all over, but we took them and said, okay, next level, what does that look like for our group? And then now that we know it's the three that we're focused on inside just our group, which is trust, community, and success, what can we do to really make those come to life in the individual geographies, in the individual business units, in the individual ways of working that we have across our company? So for example, let's take community. Community looks really different if you are part of a team that is all co-located in the same geographic area. You have space in an office that you all more consistently use than don't. That community and the nature of that community looks pretty different than a community that is spread around the globe, rarely sees each other in real life, but always in virtual life through screens. How community is expressed and supported in those two different spaces is different, but that doesn't mean that the concept of community is any less important in one or the other, or needs to be given less time in one than the other. They're just going to be expressed differently. Likewise, success is a tricky one, right? Depending on the nationality or the geographic culture that you happen to be a part of, different people have different associations with the word success or the concepts of competition that also tend to come along with the concepts of success, right? So in the United States, where we tend to be rather individualistic and a competitive nature is often a sign of strength and considered a good thing, there are other cultures where that individualistic nature is not considered a particularly positive thing and maybe looked down upon. So how do we think about culture in the United States versus Japan? Or excuse me, how do we think about success in the United States versus Japan? Well, success is going to show up probably differently. There's going to be different elements of that success. But the key for us is we want to succeed together and we want to succeed. So whatever that definition is in your local climate or subculture or group should be embraced and supported with that common thread that runs across it. Does not need to look and act exactly the same in every single instance, but that those foundational stones, if you will, ought to be there for us all to stand on.
Yeah, that's really good. So how do you get people talking, right? So I think sometimes HR leaders are in their own area, in their own space, and they kind of get bought into that. But how do you open up the doors to communication if you've got, the US, Japan, Germany, Spain? How do you kind of open up those doors to conversation around culture and making sure everyone's on the same page for that?
Well, one of the things that we've done that I think has been really, really successful is a series of connection opportunities that we run in our organization that we call Ask Me Anythings. And people are right off going to say, yes, but some people won't ask you anything. You're exactly right. Sometimes they won't. But what we do is we try to get leaders from different parts of our organizations at different levels in the hierarchy to really host kind of like the conversation you and I are having, Trevor, really an easygoing, more casual conversation. our thought or our theme behind it is we want to have the kind of conversation we might have if we all ran into each other in the same break room somewhere. That's the kind of conversation we want to have with Ask Me Anything. So we try to spin up these groups. We try to keep them relatively small when we can. Sometimes there's high demand, they get really big, but we try to facilitate safe spaces for conversations. Some people are very bold and they want to ask tough questions and put people on the hot seat, and two things have to happen for that to work. One is the leader has to be comfortable knowing that, you just don't know what you're going to get. There's a reason it's called Ask Me Anything. You might be able to ask me anything from what is our policy around how often we get new laptops, all the way to, what do I think about this particular thing happening in a particular community, right? So you just never know what you're going to get. So you've got to have leaders who are comfortable and confident, being authentic, and being transparent. You also have to have created a culture that rewards a safe place for people asking questions. And even when you have a culture that rewards a safe place for people asking questions, some people still won't. So you've got to create mechanism that those questions can continue to bubble into the conversation, even if people may be reluctant to directly ask them themselves. So we go out of our way to find opportunities for anonymous question asking, or you can submit your questions into this group, which is known to be a safe space, and those can be translated into the meeting so that there's a disconnect between who's asked the question and who actually receives the question and answers the question. So we try to do things like that where we're continuing to break down barriers. The more we can demonstrate that we're all in this together, the stronger that culture becomes. Community is not one of our pillars on accident. And community doesn't mean I direct the people who work for me. It means we are in community together.
Yeah, that's great. So last question, because I know we need to open it up to some Q&A and kind of get some dialogue going and answer some great questions, because I think this has been a fantastic session. And so hopefully, I know we'll get a lot of questions out of it, but if you could give any advice to an HR team right now, and it could be one or two things, what would you say would be the advice that you would give someone who's really trying to make sure they have some intention around a strong culture for their global company team? What advice would you have for an HR team for that?
Great question. And the first advice I would give is ask questions. There is probably nothing more valuable than listening, particularly in the spaces that we're in and the spaces that we're talking about. I know this is an old adage, or that was used even when I was a little kid, but 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? 2 ears, 1 mouth. We should be listening at least twice as much as we're talking. I've not done a good job of that today. The number one piece of advice I would give is go listen. Go have conversations in different and sundry parts of your organization and ask your people, how would they describe the culture? Would they recommend their best friend come work with them? What are the things that are important to them that are getting fueled and supported in the organization? And what are those things that are not? And listening to really understand, and once you listen in enough spots, you'll start to put the dots together as to what the culture actually is. Again, regardless of the pretty words on the wall. So the number one thing I would say is listen, whether you've just launched it or whether you're, working to, working towards changing the culture. Listening is the most important thing you can do.
Yeah, that's good. That's definitely listening for sure really helps. And it's very impactful to listen to your people. And I think that message that's been talked about across the board as we've been having this conversation. So we have our first question up and for you, Kim. And so how do you ensure consistent communication that connects with each particular culture?
Great question. And first of all, whoever said that, big shout out for recognizing communications as the really important medium that it is. I think all too often, and us in this business will know this, very often communications is sort of assumed that that's a simple thing to do, that somebody just slaps some words on some paper and they send it on out there, and that doesn't work, right? So great communications are a very professional, it's a profession, first of all. So let's just call it what it is. It takes a lot of skill to get it right. So ensuring consistent communications that connects with each culture takes extra work. So you need to tap into, and here we may be talking about nationality type cultures or geographic type cultures. We need to tap into your workforce that is resident in each of those cultures to do some testing around messages. We might need to use different words in different areas, but we do need to make sure that the meaning is consistent. So making sure the meaning is consistent is probably more important than making sure the literal words are consistent. That's what
Okay,
I'd
no,
say there.
that's great. Oh, yeah, that's great. And it's really about the meaning. The next question that we had were, what are some practical ways in which we can provide consistent leadership and support to people in all different levels of an organization, from the ones who are more outspoken to maybe some of the others that are a little bit more reluctant to speak and kind of communicate how they feel or give ideas? What's your
That's great.
advice on that?
Awesome. Because the last thing we want to do is miss out on the contributions of our introverts or those who may show up as more introverted in our organizations, right? It would be horrible if we missed out on all the greatness that they can offer to our organizations. I guess the first thing is you've got to encourage your leaders to be self-aware. I tend to be pretty extroverted. You probably figured that out listening to me.
No.
Maybe just a little. I tend to have a lot of energy. I tend to be high energy. So if I'm speaking with a person on my team or a person on another team who maybe isn't quite as bubbly or quite as energetic as I am, I need to make sure I'm skilled enough in my communication style to modulate so that I'm not sucking all of the air out of the room when I'm talking to that person, right? Because I run a real risk of doing that. So finding ways to engage people. There are people, some of my direct reports are significantly less extroverted than I am. And so as we got to know each other, we talked about how best can I elicit from you what's on your mind. If you're uncomfortable me putting you on the spot in our team meetings, what other mechanisms can we use together to make sure I don't miss out on the goodness that's running through your head? And we all know there are some specific techniques that we can use with our more introverted team members, things like providing agendas and materials ahead of meetings so that the introverts have time to, and I'm using that as though it is a simple group. I understand it's not, it's a shorthand for today. So that those introverts have time to read the information, digest it, prepare their thoughts. Generally don't like to be put on the spot. They like to have an opportunity to prepare. So there's some techniques like that that are pretty consistent that you can do.
Okay, great. One more question for you, Kim, but before we run out of time, because I think this is a very important one. Without having leadership taking full command, so how do you promote and encourage collaboration and connection among employees of different cultures?
Well, it starts at hiring. And it starts at candidate selection, really. So we need to hire for mindset as much as we hire for skill set. And I know that is a controversial view, but it's the one I stand in. But we do need to hire for fit with our organization. If we are a highly collaborative organization and we are hiring individuals who we know to prefer solitary work, we need to make sure that that solitary work is in a way that is supportive of the overall culture and not driving it down, right? So the first thing that we need to do is think about it from the very, very beginning stages. Think about it when you put a team together. When you put a team together, what's the most important element or way of working that team will need to be successful? If it's a type of work that can be done largely independently and brought back together in spurts, then the fact that your team likes to work independently is going to be great. If it's a group that needs to be together and working in concert all of the time, you probably need to look for different mindsets or ways of working to get that combination right. So intentional thinking around how and where you put people and how you pull people together, I think probably is the place to stay there. And it does take extra time, so know that.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you so much, Kim. This has been a great conversation. I hope I'm sure everyone has learned a lot from you, what NTT Data is doing as far as a culture perspective. It's absolutely amazing and fantastic. So thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate it. And I will hand it back to Wouter.
Great. Thanks, Trevor. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Trevor, Kim, both of you, thank you so much, and especially Kim. As our World of Work Trend Report depicts, I think NTT data is an excellent example of listening to the heartbeat of an organization. It's impressive also to put such a big thing as global culture into this one session. So excellent job. Thank you so much for all the insights. And that was day one of Top Employers Inspire. Outstanding contributions and insights from our certified top employers around the globe. My brain definitely is working with inspiration, and we sincerely hope that you've gained insights and can turn them into action tomorrow. The little ones, or maybe the bigger insights for the longer term. And we have tomorrow and also the day after more of Top Employers Inspire. Tomorrow we have certified top employers by the likes of Amgen, Coca-Cola and Groupama. There's one session in French, so be aware if you register. Tomorrow, just to name a few, we'll be discussing how flexibility can reinforce the organizational culture, giving purpose and vision through a shared company project, delivering a personalized digital employee experience, and in the area of neurodiversity, we have a very interesting session on neuroplasticity. So, do yourself a learning favor and register for some more sessions. We are aware that you might not be able to attend all of them, but then you will be first in line to receive the recording, and then in your own time make the notes and generate the most valuable insights. Because we are sharing insights for a better world of work, and I and the team hope to see you again in one of the next sessions for Top Employers Inspire. Thank you.